first pulse has a bit that kind of does this sort of thing, and then the tail end kind of does that. And your problem is that if this distance here, let's say this is 1,000 feet, this here could well be 200 or 300 feet even. So that means that you can't actually see, and this here is probably the same, this is probably a couple of hundred feet. So if your pulse, this guy, appears in here, it's really, really difficult to find it, and that was the problem we had the other day, was we could see that there was something going on in the end, but it was very, very hard to say where.
Right.
Because it's right in here. Now, as we said, your two options are you have a PD amplifier, and that is something like 10 to 500 kilohertz bandwidth. That's the standard amplifier. And then you have a PD site locating amp, PDSL, and that is something like, I think it's like about 200 kilohertz maybe, up to 4 megahertz bandwidth. And the only difference to you is that it changes the shape of the pulse. So where the PDSL might look like this, the PD one might look like that. Because it can't actually resolve the high frequency stuff, so it kind of blobs it over.
I got you.
And now if your fault is here somewhere, then the PDSL amp is fine. It's only when the cables get real short that you need this guy. And the other problem with the PDSL amp is that because you've got such a big bandwidth, you're pulling a lot more of the noise from outside. Right. So you'll see that you'll get a lot lower background noise with this one than this one, and the background noise screws you up for doing site locating, because obviously you've got all these pulses coming in, and you want to, and amongst these somewhere are your site location pulses. So you want to set your gate. So instead of you seeing a pulse and then all this lot, you say, what the hell am I looking at now? You set your trigger level to get rid of all this stuff. So then you only see, hopefully, this kind of thing. But that noise, that there is your noise level. So obviously the higher that trigger level, that noise level becomes, the higher you have to lift your trigger level to get you out of the noise, which means the higher the actual fault has to be. So you'll probably find a lower level PD fault with the PD amp than you will with the PDSL, because you saw our background noise looked like it was 7 or 8 or even 9 PC with the PDSL amp. So that means if you had a 5 PC fault on the PD amplifier when you were testing it, when you switch to the PDSL, you would never see the fault.
It's just lost.
It's lost in the noise. So you end up having to kind of find out which one gives you close enough to the end here, so you can, if it's down here, gives you the resolution you need, but then you've got to balance it against the noise that you're going to come barreling in with it. So you're kind of doing that kind of balancing act. So in most cases, as long as your length is reasonably long, you'll probably never need this guy. If it does, it's going to be because you've got a fault close to the ends and it's big. It's a lot of PD, so it's way high enough to come out of that noise.
Right.
So you can use either system. You can do the quick PDSL like we were doing, and you can use the full PDSL system, the automated one, which actually does the three, the separate things. It does a length calibration,
right.
and it can be useful because it gives you some iteration. So it does some averaging. So if the pulses are hard to see, sometimes that iteration forces it to give you a clearer signal. So you might find that you end up seeing two pulses like this, and then you run the the fully automatic PDSL, which does iterations, and you start to see something appear out the noise, because it's reiterating. So that's because it's continual incident. It kind of averages out the results, and the noise starts to get averaged out a little bit, and you start to see the pulse a little better. So that one can help you in that way. Quick PDSL is a lot faster, and you can do it from the same screen that you do in PD. The other downside with the quick PDSL is when you set length, you need to see the pulse from the front and the pulse from the tail. So you need to see these two guys here. And then you can actually tell it's a little button that says, you type in the feet length and it says cal for length. So it'll set the distance between these two on your screen as being 1,200 feet, whatever. And then when you slide the cursors, you'll see the cursors are set at full distance. And as you slide the cursor, the foot window goes with the cursor. So when you slide the cursor over where the fault is, it'll give you a distance. But again, it gives you the distance to the tail, not the distance to the front. So you can still use it, but if you zoom in around this area, because you're trying to zoom in, it's not intelligent. It doesn't zoom the cursors in as well, following the distance. If you then move the cursors, or the cursors were in the same place, it'll tell you that the distance has changed, because it's zoomed in. So then you can flip to time mode, and you can say, well, I can select how many microseconds it was from here to the fault. And then you know that it travels at 530 feet per microsecond. So you do a quick calculation and say, well, if it took that many microseconds, because it'll give you the microsecond distance, you can work out how many feet it was. So you don't need to do it proportionally then. You can, so by feet proportionally, you can just look at the time and then calculate it in feet, which is what we did fairly quickly. Just use 30 microseconds. So you say, okay, it travels every microsecond, it travels 530 feet. So if I've got 2 microseconds, it's travelled 1,060 feet. So you can say, okay, so that fault must be 1,060 feet.
Right.
Times 2, of course, you've always got to multiply it.
Well, if we go back, I'm trying to. If we go back to this, because we looked it up backwards, and what we were saying was lost. Since we put it back, wouldn't that be the bottom of the reel?
Well, you have to, what I think would be the easiest way to deal with it is to ignore the terminology of top and bottom. That's only any use to you when you look at the text they use. To us, top and bottom has no meaning. To us, it's either start and finish, or to the system when you're doing location, it's powered end and non-powered end. So this pulse always belongs to the powered end. Doesn't matter if it's the start or finish of the reel, top or bottom. It belongs to the powered end. The tail pulse, we call it the tail, but it's still the non-powered end.
Right. So then, doesn't that, were we thinking backwards yesterday? Because I'm still bothered by that 10,000 foot reel that we had yesterday.
Right.
It was chopped in half.
Well,
brought
we
back,
saw the fault, we were thinking the fault was right here.
which is,
So that means the fault was very close to the non-powered end, which in our case was the top of the reel. So if they took the top of the, because we were lapping off the top, weren't we?
right.
And we got rid of one fault. So if it was the top of the reel, because it's the non-powered end,
Why did it pass when we
I
brought
don't
it back?
know. I don't know. Because it doesn't look like they cut anything off there, unless it was in just that piece that we cut out.
I mean, but what's
Which
the
is possible.
Unlikely.
And it's still possible, because we knew the fault was at that end. It's possible that we just didn't lap off enough.
That close though?
It's possible.
I mean, it is possible, but
I mean, the only other alternative was that fault that we saw in the middle, that kind of would come and then go and come and then go, but we kept seeing that little pulse that was in the middle, and I discounted it, because generally, if it's exactly in the middle, it's not real. Unless you can keep reliably getting it, trying different things, it's always in the middle, you usually discount it. because it's a ghost reflection. But if it was in the middle, then when they cut it and took 50 feet out, they could have cut the fault out. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just thought we'd look at that first, only because I know that you were
Right.
having a problem with that when we were looking.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is the thing that catches you out. It catches me out too. Because if I haven't done this for a while, I have to draw it out again.
Right.
Because when you look at the picture, the natural tendency is to imagine that the picture that you're seeing is the direct
It's a
correlation
representative of the length
of
of
the
the
length of the
cable,
cable.
and it's not.
And it's not. That's right. Because the second pulse is not coming towards you. It's gone backwards first. And that's the thing that catches you out. Because you imagine, oh, I get a pulse that comes to me, and then I get another pulse that comes to me. And they're travelling down the cable, so one cable travelled from here, and that one travelled from the back and other. So obviously it's an exact representation. But it isn't. And the auto PDSL picture is the same. It shows you the same relationship. But when it says up here, cursor to top, cursor to bottom, it's assuming that top equals powered end, bottom equals non-powered end. And it'll measure distance to top, and it'll measure that distance. And it'll give you that distance.
Right.
So when you look at the list, it seems as though it looks like they're smoking something. Because
Right.
that's the distance right there, and they've reversed them. You know, what the hell are they do that for? Because they understand that this is a representation of the inverse. I mean, you can look at it and say, well, that's the start pulse. It actually isn't. But as far as the representation is concerned, it is. But the biggest one is the one that came first. So technically, that's still the start of the reel.
Right.
It's just that inversion catches you out. Now, as far as the PD